Hey, what's up, everybody? Time for another game theory video. If you like the videos, like, comment, share, support the channel, super chat, PayPal, Patreon, super like if you want. I appreciate it. Thanks. New Year's gift. Fuck you. Anyway, I want to show this in motion again because we're talking. I've been making all these footsie videos, but I want to really display, hopefully, why the idea of what footsies was back in originally Street Fighter 2 cannot exist in today's day and age of games. Okay. And I also want to talk about the difference between footsies and neutral because footsies is a part of neutral, okay? But neutral is not necessarily footsies, right? So let's look at this again, okay? Right. Back in the day, the character's going to crouch, right? Look, back in the day, it was not normal. Like, now, of course, if this was fucking Street Fighter 6, we know that would fucking hit you because everything fucking hits you ducking. Like, just think about what a simple thing like that is. Back in the original Street Fighter 2, it was rare to have pokes, standing pokes, that could hit you crouching, ducking, whatever you want to say. Ducking low was kind of your sweet spot because there were no overheads yet, right? So to actually poke with a lot of characters, guess what? We had to do low attacks. What the fuck? Are you serious? Do you mean footsies is actually exactly what it looks like? Standing attacks didn't all hit you ducking back in the day, okay? And then also we have to get into, like, just think about the priority system as well. Not priority system, but hitboxes and hurtboxes, excuse me, to the over-analytical nerd. Back in the day, when we think about, Shotos were, probably the worst character in the game. Some people say Zangief was the worst character in the original Street Fighter 2, but original Street Fighter 2, not including, Championship Edition hyper fighting, thereon after, right? Characters had longer range pokes than Shoto characters, right? But the mash on duck short was a force field of sorts, right? Even that the poke is so long, look at this. You could just duck short pretty much everything, within reason, right? So you had to play footsies. That was Ryu's poke. Of course, you had, duck forward and, roundhouse, but duck short, you mashed on it. Because that beat other attacks. And just like I've seen other supposed people that are smart about Street Fighter, they're like, oh, you always poked with hard attacks and stuff like that because that hard attacks beat light attacks. It's the exact fucking opposite in old school Street Fighter. In old school Street Fighter, mashing on attacks were the high priority attacks a lot of times in neutral. In neutral, right? As footsies is a part of neutral, but neutral and footsies are not necessarily synonymous with each other. Right? What else did it show? Because you got to remember too as well, if we were to think even about the fireball as a poke, it wasn't until something like Championship Edition where I didn't put it in, but I put it in another video. In the original Street Fighter 2, when Ryu would pull back for the fireball and start to shoot it, now we didn't say things like hurtboxes and hitboxes, but Ryu had an extra part of a hitbox on his leg. So he could not even try to fireball pokes the same way he could, like that, in say Championship Edition where he would be safe. Oh, hey, I'm gonna try to fireball that. You know what I mean? Oh, if this was Street Fighter 2, he would get hit. But once you got to games like Championship Edition and thereon after, you started to be able to use the fireball in sort of that footsie range, right? As footsies started evolving, right? If we were to look here, I talked about the Vega example because people are like, oh, well, characters will always have, fuck footsies, fuck, there was never footsies in Street Fighter 2. Look at characters like Vega, all that kind of stuff, right? There's always been different ways around footsies. Saying there are different ways around footsies kind of implies that there actually is footsies because if you were smart enough to actually know what the fuck this is, and remember, I've showed videos. People called things footsies back in the day, those little Tomo videos. You can see that's footsies. There's actually no question about what footsies is, right? Look at this. So back in the day, look at this, even a character like Vega. All my standing attacks but Fierce and Roundhouse don't hit you crouching. So you can just crouch everything, right? And even then, look at that. The range is not as good as you would think when you have the hurtboxes and hitboxes because normally you would think if I have a far range poke, I want to use the far range poke as far as possible, right? I mean, that's kind of, that makes sense, right? But guess what? When you try to use it far away, it doesn't even beat my stand short half the time. And half the time I can just duck strong it. You know what I mean? And then if he gets too close, he can actually be duck shorted again, right? You're like, oh, well, there's going to be, I think I showed things like slide, right? You know what I mean? Even if we go to here, look, this is still turbo, right? Oh, what about slide? Slide is so good. Slide does not beat Ryu playing footsies. Do you see what I'm saying? This idea that Vega owns footsies and everything, Vega's footsies are actually, if you think from a traditional Street Fighter aspect, Vega's footsies were not quotation marks good. The whole reason he is a fast character and has ways to fuck neutral to get around footsies is because his footsies was not good, right? Even if we're to go to something like this. And I said the same thing still applies to Super Turbo. Now, again, once you got the Super Turbo, right? If you were to, say, pick Super Turbo Ryu, their footsies are not as good, their priority. But let's just look at Super Turbo Vega versus Super Ryu, which you can pick, right? Look at this, see? It's still, he's going to lose footsies for free. Even if you're thinking about Vega having these new attacks that hit you ducking, crouching, guess what? Do you see that's hitting his claw? Did you see that? Do we need to go back? That hits his fucking claw. Even though I'm mashing on duck short. Do you see what I'm saying? That's footsies, dude. That's why people call things footsies. Footsies is not some magical term. Oh, hey, I know so much about Street Fighter, so I'm going to talk about footsies. What does footsies mean, sir? Oh, well, footsies is kind of ambiguous. It implies a overall everything neutral while doing a lot of whiff punishing, using everything. But to start like going on and on, but it's kind of vague and it's ambiguous. No, it's not. That's what we called footsies back in the day. Footsies, okay? Now, you could say that footsies changed. You could say that neutral changed, right? Because, of course, what is neutral? Like the neutral, you could say that the neutral in Street Fighter 2 involved a lot of footsies. I've used the example of Karna's Revenge is a game that is fucking footsies on fucking steroids. You know what I mean? If you see, that's why I always said one of the things people don't understand is even if I were to try playing video games nowadays, you got to remember, after having surgery on my hands, I get shots and everything like that. My body, I got this nerve damage down my neck, all this fucking shit, dude, right? It's annoying playing a game like Karna's Revenge because to play that game optimally, you are mashing on lights so fucking hard throughout the match. Like, I can't be bothered. I'm old. You know what I mean? But every game has a different version of neutral. Every game has its own workarounds around neutral, right? Not every game has footsies, though, like that, right? Like I said, look at this. Oh, hey, back in old school Street Fighter, hards always beat lights. Oh, yeah, sure. Right, yeah, sure they did. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You know what I mean? Now, the one move that they actually did give Vega, once you got to Super Vega, and like I've said, is his stand forward, his stand medium kick, can be pretty annoying for Shotos. Not quite as annoying for if you were actually picking super version of Ryu, but if you go to, say, Super Turbo or Ryu or Ken, right, their priority, their hitboxes and hurtboxes are actually much worse, so that move can be quite obnoxious. But if you're thinking about just regular sort of footsies playing a more footsie-oriented old school Ryu compared to Super Turbo Ryu, you know what I mean? So what do we have here? So again, let's look at this. And I got one more example after this. Footsies started changing, and hopefully you don't kind of like talk about proximity guard, and all this kind of stuff, because footsies, just playing footsies like that affects the neutral so much in old school Street Fighter because it affects things like proximity guard and all this kind of stuff. But let's look at this again. Once we got to Super Turbo, what I was saying in that recent video, again, we have these normals. If this was Street Fighter 6, that would hit, right? But in old school Street Fighter, crouching is kind of your safe spot, right? But then guess what? Once we got to something like Super Turbo, where you're like, okay, well, his footsies are a little bit weaker, but guess what? Even though his footsies are a little bit weaker, I now have a new attack that can hit you crouching. You're like, whoa, wait a second. Like, think about that on a deeper sort of level, right? A character like Ryu, who is perhaps a character that did not have as many fuck you neutral moves, you know what I mean? But then once you got the super, you could say air hurricane kick is kind of a fuck you neutral move. And if you consider a fireball a poke, maybe that you could say is a sort of fuck you neutral move, even if you're being very, you know what I mean, loose with the word, I guess. But look at that. That safe spot of being able to duck is no longer there. And of course, there's even more niche uses of that to actually beat footsies, but that's very niche, so we're not going to get into that. But you can even say Rush Fierce is, oh, wow, that's a move that hits you crouching. That's pretty weird, pretty obscure if you think about actual old school Street Fighter, right? And then, like I said, one of the things that kind of differentiated Ken, if you think about from Ryu, is like, wait a second, I have some pokes that you can't just crouch. You can't just crouch, and I can actually move forward. Back in the day, I could not move forward. Back in the day, if I am poking you, I cannot move forward because the footsies is kind of a check. Now I can actually move forward while poking you, and you cannot just duck it. Do you see what a drastic difference that is if you're thinking about the game on a deeper level, about the progression of Street Fighter? I mean, because, you know, you're talking about fuck neutral. Oh, Vega is fuck neutral. Vega is fuck footsies. There's a lot of fucking old school players. They don't even like supers. Supers is fuck footsies, you could say. Supers is fuck neutral. Every game has its own version of fuck neutral. You know what I mean? But not every game has footsies, right? Again, look at this. I've said, look at a game like fucking Street Fighter Alpha. What did they start doing? Yeah, there's a couple attacks that can miss you ducking, but I made videos long before about this, even before I got into all these footsie videos. Alpha started changing because you had, especially the stand strong with Shotos. Stand strong, like Shotos should not have a fucking stand strong that hits you ducking like that. The moves are obnoxious, right? Stand strong with Shotos, you think about Ken and Akuma, especially Ken because, you know, you don't have to be worried about getting an overhead. But say like a move like Ken stand strong is so obnoxious from the standpoint of a Street Fighter game, right? For a Shoto to have an attack like that, right? You're like, oh, wait, I have pokes that can actually hit you ducking. And of course, I've said before, Ryu Stand Forward, I dedicated a whole video to that. Ryu Stand Forward, if you think about the whole perspective and history of fighting games, Ryu Stand Forward in the original Street Fighter Alpha is actually a serendipitously fucking amazing move. If you think about it, like go watch that video. But, you know, stuff like that. Oh, I have a stand short that can poke. Oh, I have a fucking hop kick. Oh, I can actually, not only can I beat footsies, and even if you go back and look at those old fucking strategy guys, that's why I say it's so crazy to me that people don't know, they want to pretend this isn't footsies. What do they say in those old strategy guys? Oh, if the person is playing footsies in foot games, Ryu now has a hop kick to beat footsies in foot games. Whoa. Galaxy brain. Like, you don't know where, like, people, it's a made up footsies. The idea that people like, like I said, it's the Ouroboros of like the community sucking it off and pretending that they're smarter than they are. Oh, footsies has too much of an effect on a match. It's too simple. Oh, Fireball Dragon Punch has too much of an effect on a match. It's too simple. Oh, basic Dragon Punch mix up to throw. Oh, that's too simple. You know what I mean? Oh, let's add supers. Oh, you know, supers. Yeah, well, supers are kind of cheap. I don't know if I like supers. Let's add 3 levels of supers. And you know what? Let's add combos and everything like that. Oh, fuck combos. You know, well, now combos actually take skill. I don't like those. You know what I mean? Let's go forward. You know, I don't like, you know, I want more complicated things. Oh, let's add custom combos. Oh, well, again, well, fuck. I know I said I didn't like supers, but I like custom combos. Oh, the next game, okay, I admit custom combos were suck. But hey, you know what? And now we get back. Oh, hey, now it's Street Fighter 5, Street Fighter 6, where the fuck it is. You know, all these new games suck. But back in my day, things were simple, and I liked footsies. What? You just said you hated simple things, motherfucker. That's why we've been changing it for you. Now, of course, I like the simple things, right? Like, I like the foundational stuff, but, you know, I'm speaking for the Jimmy here. That's how they fucking talk, right? And then they use footsies as almost like this sort of like, hey, I'm so smart because I know the word footsies. And like, whoa, you could play footsies in Street Fighter 2. You must have been so amazing because footsies means all of neutral, right? Because that's how you use the word now. Yeah. And they're like, yes, that's exactly what it meant. Yes, that's what I meant. Scratching my head, right? It's just a stupid way to try to sound smart. And then, of course, this is something, too, that they started adding more in Alpha. And you know what I mean? I showed that example with DJ because it's something I've never seen talked about before ever. You know what I mean? There's this idea, and I've seen even recent tournaments, they say that Ryu has no move that can beat DJ's Duck Strong. Ryu can do nothing about that. And DJ's Stuck Strong is a strange move in that his hitbox, or her, excuse me, her box, excuse me, extends just a little bit, and Ryu can actually stand fierce it. And once you got to alpha, something that probably also is not very known that I've showed a little bit before is, guess what? They started adding certain attacks they would give a stray hitbox when you would do powerful footsie attacks, that they could be beat by that. Now, those are pretty big call outs, but they actually started adding stuff like that. And a very bizarre thing about Street Fighter Alpha is, though, that does not work for Stan. Isn't that weird? I don't know if it doesn't work for Stan because they were experimenting with the game, and I'm not saying that I think that actually should beat that. I don't. I think if an attack is not actually aimed at you, if an attack is not hitting you, I don't think it should necessarily hit you. So having a stray hitbox on certain fucking normals, I think, is actually pretty stupid. But it does show some experimentation. Like I said, I don't really care for that personally if I'm thinking about game theory and game design. But I do think the Ryu's stand forward, though, like I said, I dedicated a whole video to that. That is an amazing move, how it actually avoids footsies in Street Fighter Alpha, and it just barely will hit you when you are at that sweet spot for footsie range. And I think it's actually a very interesting deep dive into games. But anyway, remember, if you like the videos, like, subscribe, comment, share, support the channel if you want. I appreciate it. Thanks. The end.